Oh, yeah, I just want to ask, like, if all the teams are present here and they consent for this to be spectated.
CO consent.
OG consents.
OO consents.
CG consents.
Okay, with that, just a second, let me set up my laptop. Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Sridhar, and I'm grateful enough to be given the opportunity of chairing the Open Grand Finals of VAAGYUDH. Congratulations to those who are running a very successful tournament, and as it goes with, I think the cap usually a successful tournament that too on time. With that, I welcome you all to the Open Grand Finals. We're debating on the motion that this house recreates the contemporary revival of Stoicism. Just starting with a quick roll call. Is opening comment here? Is opening opposition here?
Yes.
Is closing out here?
Yes, we're here.
Is CEO here?
Yep.
With me on panel, we have Anish, Devanshi, Gopal, and Samar, and I would request them to introduce themselves.
Hi guys, congratulations on being here. Congratulations on the comp. I'll just be a panelist for the round. Have a great day.
Hello, Devanshi, panel for this round. Congratulations. Have a great debate.
Hello everyone, Gopal Christian here. All the best for the debate. Congratulations for making this far.
Hey guys, Samar this side, panel in this round. Congratulations on winning the finals and best of luck.
I request the OC to please share the timer on the screen. With that, just last roll call for opening government. I don't think they responded.
Yeah, OG is here.
OG is there. Okay. With that, just some basic ground rules. Don't badger, take POIs, etc. Let's begin. Calling about PM whenever they're ready.
Hello. Wait, sorry, can we begin?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Cool. Hello everyone, I'm Malhar. I'll be the PM. Quick thank yous, one to my parents because they have been funding my debate ventures, and one to my girlfriend for discussing debate motions. with me in the night, and one to my teammate who has brought me here and carried me a bit. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1, go. Burdens on opening government. We don't have to necessarily prove why stoicism is bad in and of itself, though we'll go ahead and do it, but also just why the manifestation of stoicism today has been bad or not. I.e., even if the message is good, the way it's spreading is bad. Even if we prove that, I think we win this debate. But we'll tell you why the message is bad as well. What does this contemporary revival look like? We think it looks like a manosphere of a contemporary revival of the manosphere of social media, which means fake gurus like Andrew Tate, who spread messages like you must have a hardened heart to be a real man and isolate your emotions, don't be like a girl and don't act on your emotions. But lastly, we think it's also manifesting in a way of exploitation of people as like hyper masculine resurgence, etc., etc. But we lastly think it looks like a cultural movement, i.e., people don't actually think and scrutinize the way in which this movement is, this contemporary revival is taking place, but rather going along the words in which Andrew Tate is spreading these words just because it appeals to their prejudices and appeals to let's be a real man, etc., etc. I think one, why is this problematic in nature, this revival and stoicism in itself? We have two ways in which we prove this. First, in terms of inhibiting emotions, i.e., the point of when you don't act like upon your emotions or don't let emotions control themselves, we think most humans are unable to draw this fine line between letting emotions control themselves and actually confronting these emotions and talking with these emotions, right? Which means that ultimately what stoicism is promoting, or the end impact finally,
Clarification.
is just the inhibition of emotions later. But secondly, we think this means that like stoicism as a ideology or philosophy just survives on the insecurity of natural instincts that people have. Because understand that unlike rationale or logic, which can be developed by years of debating, emotions are just intuitive in nature and part of you. They're largely controlled by your hormonal cycles, for example. This ultimately means that it's an innate human experience that can't be separated from the human emotions and experiences, which means that like the early way in which morality evolved, for example, was largely based on intuitive pumps of whether killing is good or whether killing is bad, which means that like emotions are so innate. Later, stop. It means that you can't simply isolate your emotions. We think the way in which stoicism is manifesting is that one, emotions are often being diminished in their value and actually acknowledging these emotions, which means that mental health and aspects of mental health are often being ignored because of this. I think I've linked why emotions are being inhibited and the link between not letting emotions control, because that's the way in which it's manifesting, even if that's not perhaps the way it has evolved. This house regrets motion. So I think this framing stands. But lastly, I think the way in which it's manifesting is the ridiculing of women by saying that women operate on hormonal cycles. They're unfit leaders to lead the world because they act on their emotions, because they are on their periods and they're often controlled by their hormones. We think this is a terrible tragedy that occurs in terms of the way in which this narrative is going on. But lastly, we think your emotional concerns are never given the sort of validation that they deserve, which means that there's a huge dissonance between most people when people can't opt out of their emotions, but they still feel their emotions, which ultimately means that your emotions are most likely going to be suppressed because of this sort of stoicism revival. And we think that causes a huge dissonance. It's going to bite you later if you don't acknowledge your emotions and actually don't confront or deal with them in that moment. But lastly, I think that people just, if the op case is going to be, coping with the hardships of society is good, we think this only occurs when you recognize emotions in the very first place. I think the problem is when you have a narrative of letting emotions control yourself, the way in which people are not able to separate it, it just becomes that you can't let emotions just get involved in your decision-making calculus. But lastly, we think that people in general, it's fine for people to feel bad when things are out of their control. And this is my second extension in terms of how it's important to realize that everything is not in your control and maybe feel some sort of emotional anger towards this. Because we think when you accept fate, it leads to a lot of nihilism. Because when you treat everything with a rational calculus and not have any sort of emotional instincts, most people are probably going to slave away in their life with no purpose, which means now they are going to be more prone to succumbing to society, which means that you're like on our side of the house, the comparative is you do recognize emotions and their value. But lastly, we think that like you can find some sort of purpose in that, even if even if I don't have a large scale purpose, I still have a small scale purpose in terms of helping my family, etc. These sort of things don't occur when you just rationally look at the big picture and don't consider the smaller picture, something that only your innate emotions can guide you towards. But before that, POI from closing opposition.
If people really cannot control their emotions, what then is the difference between an animal and a human being?
I mean, we can control our emotions to a degree, but the point is that the manifestation of this revival is leading to them ignoring emotions. That's our case. But lastly, then, in terms of how you just have no social mobility, I think it's very important that you don't just recognize things from a rational calculus, which means that there are some actions that individuals take, such as freedom fighters, revolutionaries, saints, that don't make sense in the rational scheme of things. When a freedom fighter is probably going to spend the rest of his life in jail for
PYOO.
against the colonial government and never gaining like any sort of material benefits, etc. from this. But he still goes ahead and goes with this sort of revolution because he believes and has this delusion that maybe it will lead India to a freedom like in the future, even if he's never able to experience this freedom itself. We think important tropes of nationalism or fighting against colonial oppression or gaining social upward mobility leading to class consciousness, these sort of things only arrive when you give way to emotions and don't just succumb to societal pressures and accept fate as it is, because we think it will just lead to stifling of any societal progress. We think collectivization of people and groups towards social mobility only occurs when you have emotional drives towards this. This is the way in which stoicism today has manifested. Is we think social mobility becomes much more tough because you just succumb to pressures, because rationally, of course, you are never going to achieve and attain social mobility. But it's important to gaslight yourself that you perhaps can achieve this. Only then this sort of is able to even manifest in any sort of way. I think here's the bottom line panel. Even if like emotions lead to bad outcome, the way in which OG wins this is people have the right to act upon their emotions and not suppress this. It is independent of an impact to whatever good or bad emotions may lead to. Our case is simple, which is just that even if it leads to good or bad, we think people should experience. OG.
Thanking the Prime Minister, calling upon Leader of Opposition.
Ridhima Sharma going as the leader of opposition. Shout out to Aryan, Mridul, and Devansh who are currently waiting to eat pizzas in the room. Preferred pronoun she, her. POI preference, right? POI in the chat. Please don't unmute yourself. With that, starting at the self count of 3, 2, 1, start. Now, panel, the structure of my speech is going to be as follows. First, I'll clarify some things that the proposition has got wrong. Secondly, I'll tell you what the current world looks like. Thirdly, I'm going to tell you what actual stoicism is and how it, reaches people in the current world and how this contemporary revival looks like. And then I'll tell you why we are supporting the current cause, right? Firstly, the PM comes here and they tell you that, Andrew Tate is teaching stoicism and all that, whatever that was. But then let's understand that stoicism rejects materialistic wealth, sex, and like whatever, external pleasures that Andrew Tate actually preaches. So I don't understand the logical linkage there was. Secondly, they tell you that, stoicism is more about emotional suppression and it's more about not recognizing your emotions. More on that later, right? Firstly, panel, let's understand what the recent world looks like and also what the world has been looking like. Panel, let's understand that COVID happened, wars are happening, right? There are climate change crises that are going on, right? There are a lot of things that people cannot control individually in the current world, right? And that has been happening in the past as well. Now, what happens in a world when all of these crises are going on, right? People feel like they don't have control. people feel overburdened with the amount of crisis and the amount of stimulation that is going on, and all of it, let me tell you, is bad and is out of their control, right? And thirdly, let's also understand that when all of these things are happening, what happens to people, to individuals? They start feeling nihilistic, right? Which is completely opposite to what the proposition comes here and tell you. They come here and tell you that when you accept your fate, you become nihilistic. Well, that is not the case. You know why? Because what happens when entire crisis is going on, people become nihilistic. Why? Because there's stress, there's a lot of uncertainty about what is going to happen next, and there's a lot of internal conflict and external conflict that is going on, right? That is exactly where stoicism comes into the picture. Panel, let's understand, stoicism does not tell you that, oh, don't feel anything, just suppress everything and it will go away. No, it does not do that. Let's understand what it actually does. Stoicism tells you that you should accept what is in your control, you should accept what isn't, and then you should find peace, and you should look for more value within yourself. Further, we are not saying that stoicism tells you to give up. No, it doesn't. You can work in those matters of your life, but what it is telling you is to accept what is not in your control and accept what is true, right? Now, coming to why exactly why exactly we how it has helped people, right? Panel, as I have already mentioned, the world looks like shit, right? Too many crises, too many things going on. Now, how is stoicism helping here? Let's understand that stoicism provides emotional regulation over overstimulation. Panel, in a world where people are dying, where a number of things are happening economically, financially, even on like countries and individual levels, let's understand that stoicism provides you with an emotional regulation where you are accepting what is not in your control, accepting what is, and then you're going ahead with your life, right? Secondly, it helps you get a mental health coping mechanism. Panel, let's understand all the stress that people are feeling right now is exactly affecting their mental health, and that is what stoicism then aims to help, aims to solve, right? And thirdly, let's understand it's a very practical thing. While the side proposition comes here and tells you it isn't, stoicism is the most practical thing that you could do in the current world, which I'll be explaining further by telling you how it has revived itself, what this contemporary revival actually looks like of stoicism, and how it reaches more people, right? Panel, let's understand, number one, a part of stoic revival is self-help books and pop philosophy, right? We have so many self-help books out there that help people understand how the mind works, and helps them get into their helps them get stoicism into their daily habits. What that initially does is that it makes sure that people are going ahead and having a better day-to-day life, right? Secondly, then it comes into online communities and through podcasts, YouTubes, etc. Panel, let's understand, in online forums, people feel like they are not alone. They can talk about their feelings, they can reflect on their thoughts. We are not saying that you are supposed to accept it and just sit down. No, the contemporary revival does not look like that, and the proposition did not frame it. Thirdly, panel, most important, it looks like therapy and psychology, right? Panel, let's understand CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, right? It is a very important psychological therapy tool that a lot of therapists use on their patients, that helps them understand their behavior, and through the understanding of the behavior, the patients are healed. When the proposition opposes this entire thing, it is also opposing this, right? Fourthly, panel, let's understand that this contemporary revival also looks like daily practices and lifestyle, which includes journaling, reflection, and understanding your own emotions. We as side opposition are not in favor of accepting whatever you're doing and then just becoming nihilistic, or not recognizing your emotions. On the contrary, we are here for journaling, we are here for self-help, we are here for everything else, right? Now, fifthly, why do we actually support this revival? Panel, let's understand, when this entire contemporary revival started happening, right, it started reaching way more people through self-help, through podcasts. In the current world where so many crises are going on, it started reaching more people. And why not taking that right now? And why do we want it to reach more people? Because of all the reasons that I have mentioned. It has helped a number of people, not only in the times of crisis, but also when they were feeling lonely. They can go ahead, they can talk to communities, they can go ahead and they have therapies that they have therapies, and then they also have journaling. There's some kind of voluntary discomfort that is also part of the stoicism, like maybe fasting, etc. That is something that is completely your choice. These are a part of the contemporary revival, but the entire thing about Andrew Tate Andrew Tate in his manosphere, that the side proposition is basing their entire case upon, that's actually not true, because I've already cleared out that stoicism does reject materialistic wealth, right? So panel, now what does the conclusion of this entire speech come up to, right? It comes down to one thing simple. We are not saying that in the current world you're supposed to sit down with your emotions and do nothing about that. That's not what we're saying. We are not saying you're supposed to suppress things. All we are saying is that you're supposed to accept whatever is happening that is not in your control, because in the current world there are so many crises that are going on, and with that you're supposed to look for peace, because if not, then nihilism exists in their paradigm, not in ours. With that, very proud to oppose.
Thanking the leader of opposition calling upon DPM.
Hi everybody, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
So I should on the camera to give thank you. Hi everybody, I'm Shaurya. I'll be going as the DPM. 1 second, thought I'll switch off the camera. Thank yous to everybody who's been a part of this journey. Thank you to Malhar for carrying me. I'll just be starting in 10 seconds. Oh wow. Okay. Look at that. Panel, guys, if you could not do that, I want to see the timer. Thank you. Yes. Panel, I'll be starting in 3, 2, and 1. Panel, Zeno in the pre-Socratic era drowned his ship with all his riches and decided to cope and develop stoicism. Understand that at the end of the day, this philosophy is a cope. It is engineered in a way that you want to detach firstly and not feel emotions and suppress emotions whenever something firstly bad happens to you in most cases, or secondly that bad thing occurs out of your control. That is, you couldn't really control it. Therefore, at OG, firstly we prove to you that stoicism principally is a bad way to deal with your emotions anyway. But secondly, the contemporary revival, even if it is in best faith, that is, even if it is able to inoculate all the values of detachment and suppressing your emotions to the point at which you feel good, even if bad things happen to you, is bad. But secondly, this contemporary manifestation in and of itself has irredeemable harms that we prove to you, specifically in this speech and in Malhar's speech. Panel, now, firstly and foremostly, why is stoicism principally bad? Panel, understand 2 primary premises and framing on this. Firstly, bad things happen to everybody in the presence of the prevalence of this movement or philosophy or not. That is, firstly, bad things happen to you regardless. But secondly, most things in life are out of your control anyway. That means you don't really decide what family you're born into, with all the economic efficiencies that you have to face when you want to go to college, probably all the social obligations, or probably all the social differences that you're born into, probably everything that you face in life. Maybe a breakup happens, your pet dying, or job promotions, which means simply by scale, if and whenever this philosophy is so prevalent and is inoculated into people so much so they're able to cope with these emotions so nicely, understand on scale they're telling probably people to cope with almost everything they experience, because almost everything is out of their control. Simply by scale, it's detrimental. Panel. Secondly, and more importantly, why are suppressed emotions bad? Firstly, the temporary cope. What does this mean? This means that even if I don't want to feel emotions, and even if it is a fairly active decision to, sure, don't feel anxious about the finals, you got it, right? That's still something I'm telling myself consciously. Does not mean my anxiety will go down. That's the idea, which means this is firstly it's temporary cope, but secondly there's huge psychological and emotional dissonance, which means that most people will fail, which means that most people will still probably feel emotions, and most people will still probably be hurt even if they don't want to be hurt, or still feel depressed even if they don't want to be depressed, or even if they're in the pursuit of achieving a state where they won't feel that shit anymore. But firstly, they feel worthless because in this fear they're shamed for feeling emotion. But secondly, and more importantly, they're in a constant fight they're in a constant fight within themselves to probably be like, hey, why the fuck are you being anxious? Why the fuck are you depressed? That is a constant tension a person feels when they follow stoicism. That's bad. But panel, again, secondly, why is the modern manifestation of it problematic, and so problematic it's irredeemable? Firstly, society is heavily premised on the idea of patriarchy, which means that, and which bounds both men and women, which means that it is misogynistic towards women and has societal and gender roles on men, which means that men inherently, since the premise of this movement, have been probably burdened of for not showing their emotions, or not being vulnerable, or not being in touch, because that is what makes them a man. In the absence of such an emotion or a habit, they're emasculated, shamed within two places. Firstly, in society in general, but secondly within other men. Therefore, the only mechanism to prove that is social hierarchies between men. That is, now within men they want to probably be at a higher social hierarchy, therefore they probably never show their emotions. That is where the society is premised on. Now, what is this contemporary manifestation? Panel, understand this contemporary manifestation occurs through manospheres. We tell you multiple times, which even O opts into self-help. Panel, two things. Firstly, even if the philosophy of Andrew Tate's persona, even if the philosophy of Andrew Tate's persona does not align with Stoicism, does not mean that Andrew Tate is one of the biggest proponents of Stoicism. To characterize it again, even though Malhar isn't enough for you, there exists a manosphere on the internet and social media and a general pop cultural movement which tells men how to be masculine, or how on gender roles in general, on the guise of probably being a self-development tool. Panel, there are multiple examples of this happening in the past. It could be Jordan Peterson, this could be Joe Rogan, this could be Hamza, it could be any self-development person that you follow transitions into something that is extremely problematic. So these manospheres are problematic because of two reasons. Firstly, they're self-sustaining. That is, they tell the people who probably buy their courses in this hostile marketing by capitalizing on their insecurities. Therefore, they're heavily incentivized to be under this guise of glorified Roman Empire's philosophy, and use it to probably push men onto their insecurities. So they buy their courses. Now they want people to constantly buy their courses, so they're constantly incentivized for the cycle to continue, which means it's extremely problematic and self-sustaining in nature. But secondly, more importantly, the content that promotes is MLM. That is, they tell their students to probably clip their podcast and put a Subway Surfer clip in the middle and probably push that even more under philosophy motivation at their Instagram. This is something that's extremely rampant, which means it's insanely in scale. Panel, again, this leads to the alt-right pipeline. That is, at the end of the day, historically all famous self-development influencers have gone into the alt-right pipeline. This looks like Jordan Peterson being this modern intellectual, now literally being bought out by Daily Wire, which is the Ben Shapiro show. Understand that how these problematic ideas are pushed onto men, and this is the modern manifestation of Stoicism, which is inherently bad. But secondly, this leads to heavy shaming of gender minorities and women who probably feel emotions to a greater degree, or are allowed to feel emotions to a greater degree in the society, which is pertinently bad because now they're completely not taken seriously or belittled in society, which is inherently bad. Now, panel, what is our counterfactual? Our counterfactual is simple. Firstly, emotions are important, especially neurotic emotions. And secondly, therapy and other things which have you been in touch with those emotions is a better way to deal with it. And this rampant stoicism is really, really bad. But before that, any POI?
Do people feel that their emotions are in or out of their control?
Panel, emotions are at the end of the day out of a person's control. That is, even if that's exactly what we're trying to push. That even in the presence of an active conscious decision of probably controlling them, you're not able to. But 3 reasons why emotions are really important. Firstly, inhibition of feeling lows makes an inhibition of feeling highs, which means that a general modern stoic person will neither feel happy or like sad, because those are emotions they want to inherently inhibit. But secondly, more importantly, growth and catharsis, panel, comes from going through tough times, facing them, and probably getting desensitized later, or getting through it. The level of catharsis that is achieved while going through an emotion face first, feeling the lows of it and getting out of it is so much more than there is of just completely ignoring and suppressing them. But thirdly, society in general does not give men enough chance to probably be vulnerable, which means most of the people in this meeting have probably never hugged their father or probably seen their father cry. Why? Because the point of which this culturally runs rampant. It is even rarer for these people to show their emotions. Panel, it is important for us to feel emotions. It is a part of human experience. Malhar tells you how likelihood of of social paralysis happens, which means generally now social movements are likely to be more nihilistic because they are engineered to lose, which means every social movement which is anti-establishment in nature, it is bound to lose. The point of which they opt into the ideas of stoicism, okay, hey, it is out of our control, hey, this is a capitalist society, hey, we will be discriminated against. They probably have a subliminal shift, cultural shift on being okay with what's happening in society. Panel, this is the inoculation of the new manifestation of the culture of stoicism. Understand how we prove to you why stoicism is inherently bad, to deal with the emotions it was meant to deal with. But secondly, the new modern contemporary manifestation of the same is irredeemable. In no world does any other house win. Vote OG.
Thanking DPM, calling upon DLO.
Hello, Aryan going as DLO. Am I completely audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Yeah, just a few shout outs. Shout out to my 4-year-old girlfriend, not 4-year-old, girlfriend of 4 years. She has been with me since everything, and I love you. Secondly, Mrudul, Devansh. Mrudul is, like great roommates. Shout out to Ridhima, nice teammate. Thank you for teaming up with me. Yet I had to iron 2 rounds, but still. Shout out to Abhay Singh, probably simping in somewhere else. I don't know. Yeah, and shout out to my mom. All right. POIs whenever. Is anyone timing or should I self-time? All right. POIs whenever. Verbalize them after 5th. Starting my speech at the self count of 3, 2, 1. Stoicism is multifaceted. So you going forward and telling me that the creation of manosphere is simply based on stoicism is wrong, because I can counterclaim that the reason why Andrew Tate succeeded so much is not because of his ideas of stoicism, because which I think is not at all the idea of stoicism, because stoicism never tells you to be materialistic or search for fame and money or have physical pleasures in the very first place. I can also frame it as something hyper-capitalist hustle culture thing in the very first place. That means even if they are able to prove that this is something that is stoic in nature, they still have to prove to me why this is the only contemporary way in which it reaches people on a larger scale, because we will pause on it that this is not the case why it happened. Look at the premise that side opening opposition presents. Opening opposition says, note at the time frame when those contemporary issues actually started or when stoicism actually emerged. This was around late 2090s and early 2020s. Reason for this is simple, because COVID was adamant at that time. Everyone was staying at their homes and everyone was unsure what was likely to happen to them. Things like COVID was a fear of unknown. You did not know, or neither did you have vaccines that can heal you in the very first place. There was nihilism everywhere. There was people were panicking, and there was a lot of paranoia existing worldwide because people had no idea what they should do in this time or what they should not do in this time. This also exists in current time when there are multiple wars happening and multiple events happening in the world that are out of your control. This also, I can also buy the frame that has been given by side government. They say there are a lot of things in this world that are not in your control in the very first place. Then the comparative becomes, do you keep going forward and pursuing those things, or on our side, you rather stop it and actualize that there are some things that are out of your control and you should live your life. This is precisely where opening opposition comes in by taking down OG's central frame. But secondly, on to say, how does this actually translate to people, and when does this narrative affect people specifically? On how does this translate to people? This is not just through Andrew Tate, because I think that is bullshit. This is also through multiple self-help groups or multiple Reddit communities, online forums, where multiple people who also believe in the same thing come together and create communities. The reason why these communities are necessary to be good is because they're moderated by people who know about stuff or who have read about stuff. The reason why these books are likely to be good, because they're likely to go public. They have to go through a lot of censorship processes. The reason why it has to be good and not woman hating is because they also want women to be a part of the consumer base. That is the precise reason why most of the stoic material that has been pushed forward in today's world is also likely to be inclusive of all those things and not something radical like Andrew Tate tries to propose. I think this takes down OG's case. Coming back to what we propose, we say that this stoicism or this rise of stoicism on how this media operates has largely done good during this time of crisis. COVID was there for 3 years. This is a retrospective debate. COVID has been there for 3 to 4 years. Post that, there has been wars. People are unsure. People don't know what they will do in the future. Works have been stripped down from them. They don't have money to feed themselves off. And sometimes they are mentally completely harassed because they stay in the same room. The moment they consume material that tells them that you have your own inherent value and you don't have to think about stuff that is beyond your control, you feel a lot more in control. What does this looks like? You being more in control means your entire ideology and your entire dignity, the way you perceive utility, is on you. You are not reliant on multiple other things to dictate how your life goes on. Because the moment you go forward and become nihilistic, this is essentially harmful. Because note the reason why there was a lot of mental health crisis during those periods in COVID and all those sort of times. Because people thought that themselves are inadequate. They had the fear of unknown. They were unsure if they are going to go out of this, come out of this problem in the very first place. The moment there is acceptance to the things that you cannot do in the very first place, you simply go forward and do not challenge your mind, or there is no such sort of cognitive dissonance existing within you. The impact of this is multifold, and the impact of this is extremely high because of two reasons. One, now you have your own self-control. You know what you should do and what you should not do. But secondly, the rise in of itself gives a larger counter narrative for multiple people to opt into. Because on the counterfactual, on comparative, on their side, this entire idea of stoicism maybe still remains underground and maybe still is limited to some simple fractions who can simply go forward and twist and bend. That means on their side, it is limited to some people who know what stoicism is. And that is precisely the point when people like Andrew Tate, they can skew this idea. But on our side, when there is a rise of this thing, and when this thing increases multifold, multiple people have access to what real stoicism looks like. This means multiple counter narratives also exist towards Andrew Tate's narrative in the very first place. This manifests in a good way because now more people have an active choice to make between stoicism and all other sort of things. But fourthly, I just want to clarify, how does people actually go forward and perceive the stoicism in the very first place? This does not mean they just simply become celibate and they just sit down at the home. No, people pick and choose according to their own needs. That means if I am feeling sad and if I'm feeling hopeless, I might go for and read those books, and I'm going to actualize the only portion of book that tells me that you are enough. If I'm going through a breakup, if I'm taking meds for my mental disorders and all those sort of things, I'm not going to think about all other things that the book mentioned, but I'm going to choose and pick the thing that makes me feel good. Things that look like you are enough for yourself, things that look like don't worry about the things that you cannot do, don't worry about things that are not under your control. What is the impact of this? The impact of this is simple, but before that, quick POI opening.
Yeah, so copium is preempted. This is short term and it never works since emotions are harder if you neglect them later.
Copium allows you to literally move forward. Insofar as you are still stuck in the same thing and you have no way to move forward, copium is the best thing to do. But largely, this is not copium because note, this is ingrained in you. The more you consume those material, the more those material will be refined. That means people gradually become more and more aware about the things around them, and hence they control themselves more. Insofar as you have no other idea of how people actually cope up with this loneliness in today's world, taking into account the post-pandemic world where people cannot actually collaborate with each other or could not have been talking with each other in the past, I'm unsure how your world could have evolved from that. This is a retrospective debate. So prove to me in such a bad instance of something like COVID and all other sort of things, why people are much more likely to think rationally in the very first place in the absence of this. But fourthly, we say we are not just emotionless animals who actually go for and do we just go for and do whatever shit we like. Because note, we are also not operating on the best idea of stoicism in the very first place. That means people can be emotional, but still people can pick and choose from this narrative that exists. That means if I don't want to be overtly emotional and I read a book, I'm most likely going to internalize that own thing. That is to say, at any point in time, people are simply better off on our side, and this is we are winning on scale just by the sheer amount of people we affect. Extremely proud to oppose.
Thanking DLO calling upon member of House.
Oops.
Hello? Can I be heard?
Yeah.
Good. Let me just turn off my electric fan. Oh, it's cold. POI's True Voice. I'll take one from O. I'll try to take one from TO as well, but preferably O. Yeah. Let's go. What? Yeah, I'll do some shout outs. Firstly, shout out to VAAGYUDH. Shout out to Rhetorica. I was here in VAAGYUDH Asian Parliamentary. I think it was the first iteration. We won grand finals. It was really fun. Same thing this time. Shout out to my teammate, my girlfriend, who has been with me the whole tournament. It's our first tournament in a while. We literally practiced stoicism this whole tournament because we were like, it's just the rusting and now we're in grand final, so we're trying our best. Time to sweat, right? Shout out to my kids that are here. And yeah, that's about it. Fun stuff. I'll start in my next word. Oh, pronouns, I don't care. I'll start in my next word. Melissa Phoebus believed that the frustration of being marginalized often gets misdirected at the most visible members of one's own community because they are more accessible than the real agents of that marginalization. The case from CG places the burden on the case from opposition places the burden on an agent not externally but instead in oneself as you move through life with the feeling of burden that this cage is your own making. I think OG is a flop. They never framed anything from PM and they never really tell you when and why we should regret this. We'll do this for them and this is important as most of their benefits will only accrue when you take the frame that we're going to give you. A few things under this. One, we don't think humans can control their emotions. They do. That's why maybe there's a contemporary revival. But it's not about whether you're able to control or not. It's about how you express those emotions and why their emotions needs to action. So opposition is right in the call out to OG. But it's precisely because you have control of your emotions that necessitates you letting go. That sometimes it's not okay to just sob in a corner and be fine with everything that's happening in the world. More on this later. Two, when we do regret something, when do we regret something? When the existence of this is inherently harmful and takes away the life of individuals by pushing them in a mire of acceptance for what they have. I think human beings being able to strive for things and believe that they can in of itself pushes people towards the right direction. Thirdly, what does this contemporary revival of Stoicism look like? Because OG is correct in saying that this is a debate about modern resurgence of Stoicism, but they never really tell you whether what this form looks like. This is modern. It's not from philosophy books. It's from the internet, TikTok, Facebook, different things. Like, for example, why you budget examples like Andrew Tate. This is rigid and it's binary between control that makes it unrealistic and it's harmful because it forces individuals to divide life into what you can and cannot do. But life is not it's not just that, it's complex. And this is important because this is something that the whole opening house missed. It's not the same as Stoicism as Marx or whatever the philosopher's name is. It's disfigured, meshed up together, and this is why it's modern. It's an abstract art. Moving then to my case line. The first thing we need to talk about is what's the counterfactual. Insofar as this is a this house regrets motion, DPM tried to sneak it into their counterfactual, but you cannot credit that because it's far too late. Blame your prime minister. What are the counterfactuals then? First counterfactual, there's better address of emotion and healthier way to express grievances on mental health. Without the influence, society places less value on emotional suppression and more on health emotional processing. It improves three distinct things. First, there's better mental health address. Therapy and emotional openness would likely be even more normalized, reducing stigma around seeking for help. Secondly, there's workplace culture. I'm going to extend on this further later because there's a toxic grind culture that stems from stoic endurance and is less prevalent, leading to more compassionate workplaces. And lastly, there's gender norms. Men might feel less pressure to conform to emotionless stereotypes that exist in status quo. And at the same time, this is not something that would be encouraged among other walks of life. This leads to lower suicide rates, for example, that exist prevalently in other parts of the world. This leads me to my first extension. Individuals that are indoctrinated into the codes of contemporary Stoicism end up becoming more obtuse. That it's because Stoicism's survival urge harmful individualism by framing resilience as purely personal responsibility. Why is this true? Stoicism teaches that suffering is a matter of perception because it emphasizes controlling reactions over addressing external causes. This looks like 8 to 9, 6 days a week employee in a toxic workplace being told to practice Stoicism rather than demand better work conditions that you deserve. This is particularly harmful because minorities, which account for a large the population in India, in the Philippines, in Vietnam, no matter what corner of the world that you're looking at, cannot make change happen, are the ones that are always forced to accept what was served to them by the world, even if it's the shittiest lottery ticket that was given to them. They're forced to eat the same stale bread, forced to get paid minimum of the minimum wage, forced to accept things that they cannot change, because that's what stoicism tells you. It is what it is, and we say that's bullshit. Crying over not getting paid enough is okay. Why is this the tipping point? What we tell is that expressing who you are and letting out your frustration is the first step to protest or to have an incentive to do something. That you're not just a worker, you're not just a corporate slave, you're not just a tool of the corporate systems and structures, that you're your own individual and you deserve to feel these emotions and prosper for change that you should be pursuing. Before I move on, OG.
Yeah. So on your side, you don't have anything to pick and choose from. On our side, at least, there exists a narrative that people can actually go for and pick and choose up to their own metric. That is to say, they don't have to be completely stoic on our side. They still can bring some values out of this contemporary stoicism.
You're trying to have your cake and eat it too. You can't be stoic and be stoic. I mean, pick your poison. You're bound to feel it because that's what status quo tells you. The second counterfactual then, there's less platform for toxic self-help and hustle culture. Let's take OO's frame on the rise of self-help, on CBT therapy, or whatever witchcraft they pull out. Why is this bad? Modern stoicism overlaps with hyper-individualistic self-help, where they tell you that you just control your reactions, bro. Without it, we achieve two things. The first is the self-help industry focuses more on systematic barriers like poverty and discrimination rather than purely individualistic resilience. And secondly, a decline in hustle culture where the glorification of suffering, such as just embracing the grind, is weaker, leading to better work-life balance among individuals. You have to note that the rise of toxic productivity correlates with stoic, adjacent rhetoric like Ryan Holiday's "the obstacle is the way." But more importantly, why is the alternative from up weak? Because on their side, it pathologizes vulnerability. This looks like stoic tests, for example, e.g. Marcus Aurelius, which equates the emotions with weaknesses. Why is this important? Men raised on stoicism are less likely to seek therapy, worsening mental health crisis, so their case is not going to fall. But let's cascade this. Why is this even more harmful in opposition? It's because it's not just men that are stoic, it's women. It's children that should be able to express themselves. In fact, their expression of their emotion are the driving force that leads to change. Look at feminism. Look at South Africa. A bunch of students tired of figure roads roaming over their university decided enough is enough, and they said that they're going to get rid of this. It glorifies emotional detachment, and we think that it's inherently harmful. The third counterfactual, and lastly, there's better action and call for accountability because there's less fatalism, and this is particularly important. What you have to note is that stoicism focuses on accepting uncontrollable things that lead to less influence on activism and social change. People now are more likely to protest, organize, and demand systematic change rather than adopting a focus on yourself mindset on CG. This looks like movements like Extinction Rebellion or other climate strikes will be broader and have more participation because less rationalized interaction with "I cannot control global warming anyway." This looks like the Me Too or the Black Lives Matter movement can get stronger support if individuals didn't detach from social issues regarding these as external. Why is this important? It dismisses the collective action as it prioritizes self-mastery over systematic change. This is ultimately, we create a more empathetic and less cold society. The modern revival of stoicism reinforced a cultural shift towards emotional restraint, and this has affected society writ large and even individuals. The regret fixes a few things in media and art and everything in between. And I think right from the get-go, we win this on MG. Proud.
Thanking the member of GOV, calling upon member of
Showing my face for the first time this tournament. Okay, can you hear me? Great. Humans are not built like a knife or a table or a chair. We are bags of meat drifting through earth and trying to find our purpose. This opposition is proud to stand above the likes of BoJack Horseman and Albert Camus, Rick and Morty and Jean-Paul Sartre. I would like you to ask government a question. In the absence of a central meaning, in a life shaped by algorithmic chaos, where we are all pigeonholed into smaller and smaller homes, are you happy? The first thing that I'm going to do, and the only thing we're going to do on CO, is just to prove why Stoicism makes people happier and why it makes the world a better place. Note that this will be different from opening opposition because they don't characterize two important things. One, what status quo narratives look like, and two, what the practical impacts are on the shape of the earth. We say this debate is one where everyone says, so far, that you have a limited control, a limited ability to control your life. The question then is how people choose to react. The first thing I want to do is establish why Stoicism will be done well. Firstly, it is a balance to our natural human tendency towards optimism bias. Because as humans, we would like to focus on big, idealistic changes. We have a natural human tendency to think that we can create a large amount of change. Think about the youth activist or the fresh politician who just enters the system and then gets disappointed. Being optimistic makes us feel good, but we are all too often disappointed. It means that if a freedom fighter or an activist cannot enact change themselves, everyone gives up because they think progress can't be achieved, which then takes OG down on this whole freedom fighter mechanism. The conclusion is that people believe that for change to work, it must be absolute. In reality, however, change is gradual. It happens slowly and then all at once. 2, why do we need a social narrative? What is the tipping point? It is difficult to be a Stoic alone, to reject materialism when all your parents are telling you to study harder to earn more. We need a large societal change because for everyone to equally recognize the rejection of modern life and its discontent, you need everyone to agree with you that this is the way you should lead your life and allow you to be happy living your life this way. The change on our side is that we understand as humans that you cannot change your emotions. So you accept them and you change the conditions around you instead. If work makes me happy, I understand that I need to work more. If spending more time with my family makes me happy, I do it because I focus on the things that I can specifically change around me. You don't focus on larger existential dread or the failures of modern politics. But what you do instead is small actions like voting or consumer activism. You focus on your family and you appreciate the people around you because you are happy for what you have instead of constantly wanting more even though you can't afford it. And this stems from an agentic gap between emotion and action, the difference between a human being and an animal. Because we may not be able to stop ourselves from feeling an emotion, but we can channel this emotion to productive uses using our personal agency and rational thought. Quote, the info slide says that we will not let emotions control us. But no control doesn't mean that they don't exist. Therapy, for example, helps you realize what you can and cannot control, and it is therefore a tool that helps you realize Stoic goals. This responds to opening opposition because we prove that we give validity to emotions and channel them productively. The impacts of this. Firstly, you are more likely to be able to solve collective action problems because everyone focuses on what they can do. Instead of focusing on the state of the world or the larger election, you focus only on your vote or your personal action as a country to make the lives of people around you who are more proximate better. 2, there is more happiness, but specifically contentment. Because maybe we can't bring you the same highs of excitement, but what we can bring you is a consistent daily flow of small joys, which is more important than the pursuit of high spikes of emotion, which mainly last for a week, because contentment can last for months, if not years. Thirdly, with regard to manosphere and the incels who resort to violence, desperation, and sexual harassment, taking down OG, we are more able to cause a change in mindset. I may not be able to control how other people see me, but I can, whether other people love me, but I can control how I behave, whether I choose to behave more cool, go to the gym to be more attractive, or change my attitude. Because I may not be able to change the face I was born with, but I can change my behavior and my attitude to become more attractive. Before I move on, is there a POI?
Yes. Mech on why Stoicism will be done well, like in therapy, doesn't work. You need to analyze if it has manifested well, which means that the problems with manosphere have impact.
So, 2 things. 1, in the absence of any narrative, as I've already established, humans are biased towards one direction. Therefore, Stoicism allows a correction back to a median that is a better balance. 2, we think that things like the manosphere are simply a blip in the larger history of Stoicism, because Stoicism actually came out from the Romans. It came out from the Buddhists who said that you should be content with what you have right now instead of constantly wanting to aspire more. For controlling your emotions instead of letting them, for attempting to assert agency over your life instead of letting your emotions control you. We think, therefore, in the larger span of human history, this is not significant. Donovan will deal with this more. Now that I have talked about social change, I want to talk about how Stoicism helps make people happier because it helps people move on from the past. Because humans are creatures of rumination. We constantly think about things that happened in the past and we struggle to stay in the moment. We have to remind ourselves And this is important because our identity is shaped by the moments of our lives. The important moments that I want to talk about are the saddest moments in our life, the unfulfilled desires and the what ifs. Because this is why people have midlife crises, when they wake up one day and realize they are not happy, because they are thinking about the past instead of the time that they have left to change things. This is why people keep walking down the same roads that they walked with their mother who passed away, instead of trying to form a new life with what they have left. Even if my first substantive argument doesn't break the deadlock on social change or happiness, we think that this is a more certain impact because all people think about the past and all people struggle to move on. We can't change the past no matter how much we would like to. What we can change instead is the future. And Stoicism fundamentally helps us realize this. And this is better than the opening government mechanism of copium because this is what real healing looks like. This helps people rationalize the pain that they went through. Things like the ex who cheated on them, the trauma that continually haunts them. It also means that people are a lot more able to be grateful for the things they have right now. This validates emotions. Specifically, this validates the emotions that bind you to the people and the causes around you. Because it is worth investing in these things because you only have so much time left on this earth. And these are the most meaningful relationships, the most meaningful emotions that you can let yourself experience. What this means is that we are much more able to help people lead a better life. Not a better life for the next week through a spike of happiness, not a better life for a single hour or a single moment in time. Rather, they are able to get a consistent flow of happiness for the rest of their lives. For all of these reasons, I've never been prouder to oppose. Thank you.
Thanking the member of OP calling upon GovWeb.
Hi, am I both visible and audible?
Yeah, you are.
Hello?
You are.
I need confirmation from the judge that they can.
No, I can hear you.
But can the judge hear me? Sorry.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you so much to whoever complained. Hi, this is Yesh. No preferred gender pronouns. POIs, please raise your hand. Again, please raise your hand. I get distracted. And I'll ask for one later. Please raise it then. I'll most likely engage with... I'll most likely ask for one for the opening for engagement. Shout outs because it's grands. Shout out to VAAGYUDH, and then shout out to the kids from AC. They've been observing us from I think round 1 until grands. So I think that's really great. I hope you guys are learning from us as your coaches. Shout out to our friends. I think Chloe's here. Shout out to Lawrence, my boyfriend, who actually told me that there's VAAGYUDH again, and I was like, okay, yeah, let's go. We registered, I think, Friday. Okay, so sorry. Again, POIs by hand. Starting this speech in 3, 2, and 1. A young man sits alone in his apartment, fists clenched, jaw tight, scrolling through a podcast telling him pain is an illusion. But his boss just fired him over an email. His girlfriend left him last week. His chest burns with grief, but he forces it down. After all, the stoic influencer said real strength means never flinching. So he swallows his rage, his sorrow, and tells himself, this is fine. I control nothing but my mind. Meanwhile, the world keeps burning and he does nothing. This is the dark reality of Stoicism's revival. Not wisdom, but emotional suffocation. Not resilience, but learned helplessness. Not virtue, but moral passivity. In CG, we peel back the facade of this ancient philosophy to expose why its modern resurrection is a psychological, social, and ethical disaster. In CG, we expose how Stoicism's cult of emotion control is literally making us sicker, turning human suffering into a silent epidemic. Second, we prove its obsession with acceptance that is killing social change, teaching us how to bow to injustice rather than fighting it. And finally, we dismantle the lie that Stoicism saves mental health, when in truth, it's just old toxic masculinity in a toga that not only men wear now, but everyone. So let's actually start where Stoicism hurts most. Not in the pages of Marcus Aurelius, but in the tight throats of people too afraid to scream when they should, proud to be in CG. Very important clarification. Unlike OG, we don't think that humans are unable to control their emotions.
POI.
It's the opposite. I told you through raising of hand. We think that humans control their emotions too much. This is not a knife, but this is a redirection of this debate for team government. But let's dismantle OG further. They tell you that this is a THR and that's intuitively true, but they never gave you counterfactual. And the fact that DPM decided to discuss it at their 6-minute mark is extremely unstrategic for government because they only give you the tip of the iceberg when in fact motion analysis 101, this is the most important. But Lawrence cascades multiple scenarios that would exist due to the regret, how society would actually look like as a THR is retrospective. Only from Lawrence so you actually get an explanation and an in-depth discussion of the effects of modern stoicism. By this alone, we must take over OG. Yeah, I'll take you.
Yeah, so it's contemporary revival of those things. That is to say, you still have to prove to me why it's not the original stoicism, because your case is entirely based on how it was originally.
If you listen to the 7 minutes of my MO, of my MG, he tells you precisely the reason as to why the revival is bad and not in and of itself stoicism. Because we told you that it is precisely because you don't learn this from Marcus Aurelius or from Seneca, for example. You don't learn this from the philosophy books. You learn this from TikTok. You learn this from YouTube. You learn this from Andrew Tate because that's the access that you have right now, and that's the modern revival. That's what it actually looks like. But extraneous responses, the rest will be integrated. OO tells you that it's more inclusive because they also want women to adapt it. This is exactly why it's bad. Because Stoicism's emphasis on emotional control is often co-opted to validate unhealthy masculine stereotypes, discouraging emotional openness. And if it's correct as they say, now it's not toxic masculinity. It's a bottling of emotion epidemic that now also happens to women, to children, to all walks of life. Note that secondly, MO never really responds to Lawrence, but I will engage with them because MO tells you that they want people happy. This is the bulk of their case. 5 extraneous responses. First, note that this is a false dichotomy because you're rejecting materialism doesn't require emotional detachment. Buddhism and minimalism also critique consumerism without demanding suppression of natural human desires. But secondly, note that happiness don't necessarily equate to apathy because in the vast majority of instances, Stoicism's quote-unquote tranquility often looks like disengagement. But secondly, note that this is a privilege. Telling a single mother in poverty to ignore quote-unquote externals is patronizing because real happiness requires justice, not just mindset shifts. Because note that stoic joy is empty. What's the point of a happy life if it forbids deep passion, grief, or love? That's not happiness. It's emotional anorexia. But lastly, a stoic feasts like a prisoner savoring crumbs, pretending scarcity is virtue. But we deserve banquets, not just in possessions, but in emotional richness. The rest will be integrated. There are 2 ultimate questions. Please mute yourself. Where do we best protect human beings? But secondly, where do we best create forward-moving society? First, where do we best protect human beings? Opposition tells you that there's so much crisis and it actually builds more regulation and resilience. Note that resilience does not equate to emotional suppression. Modern psychology like CBT and ACT teaches resilience without requiring detachment from emotions. But secondly, this is again a false dichotomy because Stoicism frames emotions as obstacles. But note that emotional awareness enhances decision making and mental health. You can scroll through the internet and this will be backed by some research. But thirdly, we prove to you that there are better alternatives, that there can be mindfulness rooted in Buddhism, for example, that achieves similar resilient benefits without the rigidity of Stoicism. Because lastly, sure, Stoicism claims to build resilience, right? But note that modern therapies that OO actually talks about are things you get in the absence of modern Stoicism. Therapies like CBT offer a more balanced approach, teaching people to manage emotions rather than suppress them. But secondly, they tell you that now they know what they can control, but what they told you from Lawrence is that there's a rigid binary of control in modern Stoicism that makes it incredibly unrealistic because Stoics divide life into what you can control and what you cannot. However, note that this binary is overly simplistic and we told you that life is much more complex than this. But thirdly, they tell you that Stoicism promotes virtue and moral clarity. First, virtue without action is empty. Stoicism emphasizes personal morality but often neglects collective ethics, like fighting injustice, for example, because Marcus Aurelius preached virtue yet upheld slavery. Secondly, Stoic virtue is self-focused. It doesn't demand challenging injustice. A slave-owning Stoic like Seneca saw no contradiction, proving Stoic morality can coexist with systemic harm. But the next important thing is where do we actually best create a forward-moving society? What you have to notice is that modern Stoicism focuses on personal virtue rather than communal well-being, fostering a hyper-individualistic mindset that ignores systemic solutions to societal problems. So if everyone adopts to Stoic economic detachment, societal problems like inequality or political corruption may persist precisely because individuals prioritize inner peace over collective action. The revival of this has been popularized in manosphere circles, where emotional suppression is glorified as a masculine ideal. But why we win is very simple. First, we told you that Stoicism's revival actively harms mental health. We've proven that Stoicism demand for emotional suppression contradicts modern psychology, so we win on science. But secondly, Stoicism undermines social progress. The opposition argues Stoicism brings inner peace, but at what cost? By teaching people to accept what they can't control, it brings passivity towards injustice. Would civil rights movement have succeeded if activists had quote-unquote detached from racism? Stoicism's revival is a gift to the powerful, a philosophy that keeps the oppressed docile. We win on morality. Third, Stoicism fuels toxic individualism. We told you how the modern revival markets Stoicism as self-help, so we win on real-world impact. Fourthly, Stoicism revival empowers toxic masculinity, and now it's something that everyone adapts. Stoicism revival isn't wisdom. It's a cultural step backward, so you must propose.
Thanking Gaved, now calling upon Obed.
Hi, can you see and hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I would like to thank Russell for taking me to my first ever finals. No other person I would have done it with, no other competition I would rather have it done than VAAGYUDH. Modern society is plagued with terror and fear on such a grand scale that the personal intricacies of one's life often get lost in the backwash. Amidst the ever-increasing uncertainty of figuring out who you are and what you were put on this earth to do, we think the life you owe yourself is not one surrendered to the hands of time, but rather the brightness of the future you stand to achieve. I want to ask two exceedingly simple questions in this debate. The first is, what exactly is Stoicism? And secondly, what therefore are its impacts? First, what exactly is Stoicism? The claim we get from the government bench is twofold. OG says that it is things like Andrew Tate. CG says it is things like surrendering yourself to the conditions in which you live, or a suppression of emotion that is carried throughout their case. I want to point out here that the information we know, i.e. that our emotions are something we cannot change, are irrespective of knowing the fact that we understand the specific conditions in which we feel these emotions. I want to ask you a simple question. Why is it that any of the 8 of us debate? Because we feel happy when we do it, or at least I hope so. And we recognize that even if that happiness is an emotion that is unwavering and we cannot pick or choose, we change the conditions in which we live to meet the emotional needs that we have. This is why a lot of the analysis Russell gives you that take down the vast majority of the characterization debate see no response. Because for things like Andrew Tate, what you actively have here is a combating of the tranquility and moral worth mentioned in the info slide in the definition of Stoicism. In cases like surrendering yourself to your fate, this stands directly in opposition to Stoicism, because things that you want to have, like the championing for further change, as I will explain, happen directly in a paradigm in which people demand to live in conditions that make them happy, as opposed to feeling themselves suffer at the hands of the frustration they feel every single day. So do people suppress their emotions? The answer is no. More fundamentally, I think the question here is to ask what Stoicism actually changes in the manner in which you live. We explained that Stoicism is a byproduct, or rather a product directly, of things like Buddhism that have resulted in society. CG's claim is that this is some Stoicism being like a messed up thing as a result of social media. They do not illustrate what this looks like. I think the incentives of individuals spreading things like Stoicism have broadly been good. Notably, this is retrospective. So you can look at individuals trying to do things like championing how you live like kumbaya, or trying to find your purpose in life, or trying to focus on self-improvement as opposed to other things. Incentive for this to be good and non-exclusionary, even at the very, very worst, is because you do not want to alienate a potential sector that you could be potentially earning money from. So buy-in is something that's much more likely under the thing that I've described. So the comparative is, as we've stated, that the things they want to talk about, like increase in therapy, are exclusively because of of the revival of Stoicism, where individuals want to find out what exactly about their life they can or cannot change, and then pursue a life in which they change the things that they can, i.e., a recognition of what makes them happy or sad, where those emotions come from, and what they can do about it. At the end of the debate, therefore, is Stoicism as government bench decides? No. It is a reflection on how people live their life. I cannot change the fact that this government bench will lie to you about the manner in which people respond to Stoicism. I can change the manner in which I feel, or I respond to them rather, by explaining our case and telling you why it is we take this debate. Before I move on, I'll take the POI from closing.
Please refer to the info slide. It tells you that this teaches humans to control emotions. So yes, it does make them suppress emotions.
A recognition that you cannot control things like emotion or avoidance of things like emotion does not deny your ability to change your circumstance to, even if you can't control them, pursue a better life for you and yourself, right? I think I've dealt with this. Second question, what exactly is the impact of all of this? They say that individuals become incredibly resigned to their fate. We explain that the reality of the situation is people live in a society in which things are incredibly bad for two broad reasons. The first is what opening opposition broadly tell you, that society as a whole in the world we live in is something that's horrible. And we recognize this broadly to be true. If society is incredibly bad, then one of two things will happen exclusively on our side of the house. Either A, people recognize that the society in which they want to live is something that does not meet the emotional bearings that they want and therefore work towards change. Or B, if the wider society is so bad that change is something that cannot be achieved, then the relevant question is, why is it that this government bench persistently continues to impose a false hope amongst the most vulnerable? Why is it that they look at people in the eyes, viewing in their eyes impending doom by way of climate change or unfettered capitalism, and tell them that your anger will be able to manifest into something, that you, as the average worker, can topple decades of the oligarchs in Russia or political dynasties that have trampled your will to live? The reality is that if the world is as government bench describes, then the very mechanisms and the life they want people to lead become unattainable. But they sell them that pipe dream. They tell them that you can achieve the things you want to achieve, even in a world where they cannot. The comparative is, if this is the reality, then having a focus explicitly on the self and what you want and the way in which you can change your life gives individuals meaning in a world where it is sorely lacking. And the reason why this is incredibly important is because it directly impacts, more crucially, the fundamental question of what the human condition is and what people can do with their lives. I think initially this already takes over everyone else in the round. But the second thing, what about the manner in which the average person interacts with things that they view as out of control? The vast majority of this debate, in contention with the opening opposition case, is that there are certain things that you cannot control, like the wider society or like climate change, for instance. The thing I want to point out here is that some people will agree with this and some people won't. Some people will try and change things by voting for policies or championing for change. Some people will believe this is an inevitable thing. But the thing that unites all human beings is a recognition that the lives that they have led are something they can no longer change at that point in time. You look back on the first time you gave a debate speech and you regret that. But in the world of proposition, all of these harms and the pressures that you feel, the immense emotions of depression and anguish become the focal point. Whereas in our world, the comparative is looking beyond that. You do not let your emotions define you. You recognize that what you cannot change is the things in your past, but what you can change is the looming future. That you strive to do things like debate more so that you can finally reach another finals, for instance, and achieve your dream. All of which leads to a life that individuals lead being better because they decrease the degree of beholdenment they have to the life that they have lead and the memories that they bear, and they focus more on making better ones. For all these reasons, oppose.
Thanking the op-whip. With that, we come to the end of a wonderful debate. Now, I would request everyone to just have a cross shake of hands. Congratulations for completing the finals and leave the room so we can deliver.
Cross, thanks for the great debate.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Great debate, guys. Thank you so much.
अरे मेरे लैपटॉप से ही होगा।
अनिकेत परमिशन दिए तो बोलूं मेल खोल के रख
परमिशन कहाँ देना है?
जैसे अपना कर लेंगे ना यार वेट।
हम स्क्रीन करना चालू कर दें?
अनिकेत तू बोल रहा है क्या कहा देख
So kindly unmute yourself.
Hi guys, till the results are being finalized, kindly enjoy a clip by our made by our team.
Hello, good evening, everyone. We have a title sponsor for Wagyu 2.0. It is a restaurant, so-called Divans More, situated in the streets of Varanasi, that is the holiest city and the spiritual capital of India, that is Bharat. So now I would like to share words of wisdom by Mr. Sagar Pratap Singh, the owner of the distinguished restaurant Divans More, wherein he want to put a light upon why we must opt for healthier food instead of opting for fast food. Thank you.
On the behalf of Devans Restaurant लंका वाराणसी स्टूडेंट्स चाहे वो BHU के हों चाहे वो किसी कोचिंग के हों या छोटे बच्चे हों जो भी स्टूडेंट्स हैं उनके लिए दिवंस मोर की तरफ से मैं सिर्फ 2 मिनट लेना चाहता हूँ। मेरा ये कहना है कि आज रेस्टोरेंट्स डे बाय डे बहुत सारे खुल रहे हैं, बहुत सारे रेस्टोरेंट्स हैं, पर बेसिक क्या है? बेसिक है फूड इज द फ्यूल ऑफ द बॉडी। शरीर क्या है? शरीर एक मशीन है जो कि भगवान द्वारा रचित है, ऊपर वाले के द्वारा रचित है, और उस शरीर के चलने में, उसके मूवमेंट के लिए, उसके स्वस्थ रहने के लिए, उसको दूर तक ले जाने के लिए, शरीर को स्वस्थ परिपूर्ण रखने के लिए एक अच्छे ईंधन की आवश्यकता होती है, और वो शरीर में है एक अच्छे भोजन की। आज सारे स्टूडेंट जो भी हैं मैंने देखा है पढ़ाई के प्रति, कैरियर के प्रति बहुत ज़्यादा जागरूक है, बहुत ज़्यादा अवेयर है, बहुत ज़्यादा फोकस्ड है। अपनी सिलेबस को लेके, अपनी बुक्स को लेके, अपनी फीस को लेके, वो सब कुछ में बहुत एक्टिव हैं। रूम रेंट है, बहुत सारी अदर रेस्पॉन्सिबिलिटीज़ हैं, बट वो सबसे ज़्यादा कॉम्प्रोमाइज़ कहाँ पे करना है? वो है फूडिंग। फूडिंग के लिए कॉम्प्रोमाइज का मतलब कि आप अपने शरीर के साथ, अपने दिल दिमाग के साथ, अपनी इम्यूनिटी पावर के साथ में आप अपने आप को कमजोर कर रहे हैं। माँ बाप, पेरेंट्स, भाई बहन अपने जो भी शुभ चिंतक है घर से बाहर भेजते हैं कि बच्चे पढ़ाई के लिए जा रहे हैं, स्टूडेंट कोचिंग के लिए जा रहे हैं, या फिर आपके साथ में हायर एजुकेशन के लिए जा रहे हैं, तो उनके साथ प्रॉब्लम क्या होती है? वो सबसे ज़्यादा फिक्रमंद होते हैं खाने को लेके। और बच्चे अपने माँ बाप को, अपने घर वालों को, अपने शुभचिंतकों को इतना प्यार करते हैं कि शायद वो इस मामले में सबसे ज़्यादा झूठ बोलते हैं कि वो अच्छा फूड खा रहा है। बट हमें ऐसा लगता है, क्योंकि हम भी स्टूडेंट रहे हैं, कि हम सबसे ज़्यादा कॉम्प्रोमाइज़ अपने फूडिंग में आज के दिन डे बाई डे करते जा रहे हैं। एक वही है एक ऐसी जगह जहाँ पे हम अपने पैसे को बहुत बचाते हैं, लेकिन एक बात सोचिए कि आप जैसा ईंधन डालेंगे वैसे ही आपका मशीन काम करेगा। और आज 25 साल के बच्चे को हार्ट अटैक आ जा रहा है, 22 साल के बच्चों को बीपी का प्रॉब्लम हो जा रहा है। छोटी छोटी एज में बहुत सारी दिक्कतें आ रही हैं, शारीरिक, मानसिक रूप से। और उसके बाद में आज आप पैसे बचा के कम पैसे में कोई फूड खाते हैं, और उसके बाद में आपकी तबीयत खराब होती है, जो कि लॉन्ग टर्म में आफ्टर 30 ईयर्स, आफ्टर 25 ईयर्स आपको पता चलता है, रियलाइज होता है। फिर डॉक्टर्स अपने अकॉर्डिंगली अपनी चीज़ों को देखते हैं। मेरा व्यक्तिगत मानना है ऑन द बिहाफ ऑफ दीवान स्कोर कि एक फूडिंग का बिजनेस और एक हॉस्पिटल का बिजनेस, दो बिजनेस बाद में है, इमोशंस पहले, भावनाएं पहले है। कि हम किसी को जो दे रहे हैं, जो खिला रहे हैं, वो हमारा छोटा भाई है या बच्चे के स्वरूप है, या वो जिस भी रिश्ते के स्वरूप में है, उसको हम अपने घर वालों की तरह देखेंगे तो शायद उसको अच्छा खिला पाएंगे। उसको विदाउट केमिकल, विदाउट रंग, विदाउट एनी ऐसी इंग्रेडिएंट्स जो कि नुकसानवर्धक हो, नुकसानदायक हो, हम उसको खिलाएं। मेरा सिर्फ यही कहना है कि आप अपनी इम्यूनिटी पावर को मत खोइए। और हम सबसे ज़्यादा ब्रेकफास्ट और लंच को स्किप करते हैं, डिनर पर फोकस करते हैं, जबकि रियलिटीज़ ये हैं कि हमें जो ब्रेकफास्ट है वो राजकुमार की तरह करना चाहिए, लंच एक राजा की तरह करना चाहिए, एक अच्छे से प्रॉपर, क्योंकि आप उसमें वर्किंग भी कर रहे हैं उसी टाइम पे, सेम टाइम पे, जो फिजिकल एक्टिविटीज़ भी कर रहे हैं, मेंटल एक्टिविटीज़ भी कर रहे हैं, और आप वर्किंग भी कर रहे हैं। तो उस टाइम पे आपको फूडिंग की बहुत आवश्यकता है, एक अच्छे फूड की, एक अच्छे मील की। और डिनर हमेशा कहा जाता है भिक्षुक की तरह करना चाहिए, ताकि आप खाना खाने के बाद में, नाइट में डिनर करने के बाद में आप सो जाते हैं तो आपकी जो डाइजेस्टिव सिस्टम है प्रॉपर वर्क कर पाए। उसके लिए बहुत लाइट खाना चाहिए। ऐसे में ही आपकी इम्यूनिटी पावर बढ़ी रहे, ताकि आप किसी भी रोग से, किसी भी इन्वायरमेंटली इश्यूज, आज इन्वायरमेंट इतना खराब हो रहा है डे बाई डे, फूडिंग में जो आपके अच्छे फल, सब्जियां और आपका ग्रेन्स आ रहे हैं, सब में मिलावट आ रही है। तो कोशिश करिए जितना अच्छे से आपको बचा सकते हैं इस भरी गर्मी में, आप जितना ज़्यादा पानी पी सकते हैं, जितना ज़्यादा लेमनेड पी सकते हैं पीजिए, अपने आप को स्वस्थ रखिए। किसी के आगे हमारा यही पेरेंट्स, जो बच्चों के पेरेंट्स हैं, उनसे भी निवेदन है कि हम पेरेंट्स की जगह कभी नहीं ले सकते, हम किसी भी बच्चे की माँ नहीं बन सकते, ना उसके घर वाले बन सकते हैं। पर दीवान स्कोर का पर्पस है, दीवान स्कोर का सोचना है कि बच्चों को, आपके बच्चों का ख्याल आप लोगों की तरह रखा जाए। हम आपकी तरह रखने का प्रयास करेंगे, और इसी में लोग जो पैसे बचाते हैं, उसी में दीवान स्कोर ने बहुत ही लिमिटेड टाइम के लिए, जो कि ड्यूरेशन है सुबह 11 बजे से लेकर 4 बजे तक, फोकस्ड ऑन लंच को प्रिविलेज देते हुए, प्रायोरिटी देते हुए, हम लोगों ने बहुत सस्ता मेन्यू निकाला है कि बच्चे आएँ, छत के नीचे बैठें एसी कंपाउंड में और प्रॉपरली अपना मील लें। वो प्रॉपर मील ऐसा होगा जो हेल्दी डाइट होगा, उसमें कोई कलर, कोई केमिकल्स यूज नहीं है, और जो बेसिकली घर में बच्चे पसंद भी करते हैं। लाइक हमारा दाल चावल है, हमारा छोला चावल है, हमारा राजमा चावल है, कढ़ी चावल है, पालक पनीर चावल है, और आपका बर्गर जो कि बहुत ही हेल्दी तरीके से बनाया गया कि कोई नुकसान ना करे। इन सभी की कॉस्ट ओनली 59 रुपीज़ है। सिर्फ 59 रुपीज़ में आपको ये सारी चीज़ें मिलेंगी। और हमारा प्रयास रहेगा कि हम आप लोगों की हेल्थ को अपनी फैमिली मेम्बर, अपने जानने वालों की तरह देखें कि आपको किसी भी चीज़ का कोई नुकसान ना हो और आप लोग प्रॉपर मील लें। और ये स्टूडेंट फ्रेंडली है और इसमें हमारा आगे इतना ही कहना है कि आप लिव हेल्दी, लाइफ हेल्दी के तर्ज पे काम करिए। और दीवंस मोर सिंगल तरीके से काम कर रहा है, वन शॉप सोल्यूशन फॉर ऑल द फूड आइटम्स। फूड आइटम से रिलेटेड कोई भी चीज़ें हो, कोई भी क्वेरीज हो, आपको कहीं पे पैकेजिंग फूड्स चाहिए, आपको रेलवेज में चाहिए, आपको स्टाफिंग के लिए चाहिए, आपको बैंक कॉर्पोरेट्स में चाहिए, जो लोग सुबह आके यहाँ पे ऑफिस में जो फीमेल्स हैं वो वर्किंग हैं, वो वर्क कर रही हैं और खाना नहीं बना पाती हैं, अपने बच्चों के लिए प्रॉपर टिफिन नहीं तैयार कर पा रही हैं या फिर बच्चों को अच्छा फीडिंग नहीं करा पा रही हैं, वो पूरा ट्रस्ट कर सकती हैं और हम उसको पर्सनली देखते हैं और कोशिश करते हैं कि आपको अच्छे से अच्छा फूड दें और कोई भी चीज़ ऐसी यूज़ ना करें जो कि नुकसानदायक हो। हमारे लिए पहले आपकी भावनाएं हैं, उसके बाद व्यापार है। धन्यवाद। और मैं अंत में आपको अपना एक सैंपल दिखाना चाहूँगा, जो कि सैंपल है आपका छोले राइस का, जो कि एक बाउल में मिलेगा या प्लेट में भी मिल सकता है, जिसकी क्वांटिटी इतनी होगी और एक सफिशिएंट क्वांटिटी है जिसको आप प्रॉपरली ले सकते हैं। और मुझे लगता है कि पूरे डे आपको एनर्जी फील होगी। सेम क्वांटिटी में आपको दाल चावल, राजमा चावल, कढ़ी चावल, मटर पनीर चावल, जो भी अलग अलग मेन्यूज है वो आपको मिलेंगे। इवन बर्गर भी हमारा बहुत सफिशिएंट है, तो हम आगे इस मेन्यू को बढ़ाएंगे। इसका टाइमिंग है 11 to 4, जो कि प्रॉपर एक लंच टाइम है। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद, आपके सहयोग का हमेशा आभारी रहूंगा। ये मैसेज मेरा व्यापार के लिए नहीं है, ये मैसेज हमें सभी की सुरक्षा के लिए, सभी की हेल्थ इश्यूज के लिए, सभी की इम्यूनिटी पावर मेंटेन रहे, बढ़ी रहे और जो कॉम्प्रोमाइज स्टूडेंट्स करते हैं उसके लिए है। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
Thank you guys. We have one more video made by our OC of Day Once More Restaurant. So, Aniket, can you please send it? Thank you guys for your time. We will be back with results as soon as possible.
Hello, good evening, everyone. We have our results with us. We will be displaying the result very soon.
Good evening, everyone. Be sure you put your feet in the right place, then start the form. With this thought provoking quote, I feel truly honored to welcome you all the closing ceremony of Wagyu 2.0.
We are so delighted to host this final segment of what has been an intellectually enriching and spirited event. Together, we have witnessed fierce arguments, eloquent speeches, and the true essence of debate.
Before we move ahead with the final announcement, we would like to take a moment to express our heartfelt gratitude to the sponsors of Wagyu 2.0. Their generous support and unwavering encouragement played a vital role in making this event possible.
So, we will now play a video in gratitude of our sponsor, D once more. We thank D once again for believing in the vision of Rhetorica's Year 2.0. Can we just have the video?
And now comes one of the most awaited moment of the ceremony, the announcement of the winner by our secretary for the Wagyu 2.0. Their dedication and sharp and nice and fair judgment ensured the high standard of this competition.
We would now like to invite our co-secretary, Aradhya Nishta, to share his thoughts and offer us some closing word of argument with the announcement of the winner of this Rhetorica's Wagyu 2.0. Sir, please.
Actually, some more participants want to join this grand auditorium and the limit is being increased by the OC. So we will be waiting for a while.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, sir. We will be announcing the winners of the Buggy 2.0 in a while.
When all the participants will be there. We welcome our secretary to tell the winners of the Wagyu 2.0.
Thank you, Janvi and Avichal. So, thank you so much, everyone, for waiting. Let me check if everyone has joined. And if you are unable to join, kindly join us on our YouTube channel. Okay, so should we start with the results or should we wait? You can send reactions, guys, if you want. Okay, so starting with the first category. So, moving on to the first category, that is invited adjudicators. So, can we have the results, please? Sorry, it is the top three adjudicators. I apologize. The first position is secured by Gopal, followed by Divyanshi Sumit Sethia, and followed by Anish Bhattacharya. Moving on to the next category, that is best invited adjudicator, and it is Raymond Chuma, followed by the next category, that is best speaker. That first position is secured by Russell with average points of 78.75, followed by second Donova Co, average point 78.45, followed by Wendy Lian, average point 78.00, followed by Archie Beng, average point 77.50, Malhar Davle, average point 78.70, sixth position by Shaurya Kashyap with average point of 76.75, followed by Rutvi Mahind, average point 76.75, followed by Ananya Trivedi with average point of 76.50, followed by Arjan, average point 76.25, and last but not the least, Lawrence de Calro, average point 76.25. Moving on to the next category, that is novice category best speaker. And the first position is secured by Russell Coe, average point 78.75, followed by at second position we have Donova Co, average point 78.25, and at the third position we have Rutvi Mahend, average point 76.75, followed by Ananya Trivedi, average point 76.50, followed by Manveen Kaur, average point 76.25. Now, coming to the Open Grand Final winner, that is the closing government. And his name and the name of the team is Stream Took All Our Money with All Team. Moving on to the final best speaker, that is member of government, C2 Spit Lorenzo de Calvo. That's it for the results. I hope you all are satisfied. And can we have a huge round of applause, a virtual applause for all the participants who participated and for the winners?
On the behalf of entire team, we extend our deepest gratitude to all the participants and adjudicators, volunteers, and everyone who made Wagyu 2.0 a grand success.
In this part of the journey. May the spirit of constructive dialogue and critical thinking continue to thrive in each one of us. Thank you so much. Stay connected, keep debating, take care. Before we wrap up our this closing ceremony, our secretary has to say something. Sir, we welcome you, Mr. Aradhan Mishra. Please take the stage.
Thank you, Avichal, for inviting me once again. Okay, so since Niket is not here, on the behalf of Aniket and myself, as secretaries of Rhetorica, I would like to say that it is both an honor and a moment of quite pride for us to stand before you today at the closing ceremony of Bhagya 2.0. Over the past 2 days, we haven't merely witnessed a competition, we have experienced confluence of voices from every corner of the nation, from seasoned national debaters to emerging voices braving their first stage. Wagit 2.0 has become testament to power of discourse, diversity, and democratic spirit. In this room and across our seasons, we saw arguments not for argument's sake, but for truth, clarity, and changes. Ideas clashed, minds expanded, and hearts overflowed with stirring discourse. On the behalf of entire Rhetorica fraternity, I extend my deepest gratitude to every participant who participated, prepared, and believed in the value of debate. To our adjudicators, whose insight shaped every round, and to the volunteers, who were the invisible backbone of this celebration. Vagyud is more than a tournament. It is a legacy we are building, brick by brick, word by word. And as we close this chapter, we carry forward a simple truth. When voices rise with reasons, societies rise with. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you and have a very great day. Thank you, sir. Thank you for kind words. We really appreciate the patience and the wait we all had. Thank you so much for your words. And once again, congratulations to all the winners. Thank you everyone. Thank you so much.